Hello everyone, welcome back. So I'm going to be doing a reading on all of this UFO, UAP craziness that's happening in Jersey and everywhere else around the world, but focusing primarily on Jersey. So I've pulled a bunch of cards to look at what's going on with the energy, what's happening behind the energy, what can we expect. And first, before I jump into that, I want to clarify or correct something that I mentioned in the last video that I posted, which was also about the UFOs and UAPs. But I was talking about the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, primarily because Notre Dame reopened on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, which was this Sunday. And shortly after I had heard that news, Congress disclosed that UFO UAP program that's called the Immaculate Constellation, which sounds like a pun on Immaculate Conception. So I had incorrectly said that that was the conception of Jesus, but it was actually the conception of Mary, right? And the only reason I was even talking about it is because the name of the program seems to imply that that event might qualify as a UFO UAP type phenomena, right? And it just seemed very synchronistic that it was being disclosed on the heels of Notre Dame reopening on that holiday, right? So it just all seemed very interesting. But again, so the Immaculate Conception is actually the conception of Mary, not the conception of Jesus. And it's the idea that she was conceived without the original sin. So somehow, some way, she slipped into the matrix clean, right? Uncorrupted, no issues, and she got to be able to do what she had to do, right? So it's interesting considering that Notre Dame reopened on that feast day, and it is immaculate, right? Who knew that it was shining white marble the entire time, right? We just assumed that it was always this dark gray box, but that was the soot, the corruption, right? So this proverbial phoenix is rising from the ashes, and there's a part of me that wonders if this means that the energy is pure now, that the energy has expunged whatever it needed to. And full disclosure, I'm not saying that the powers that be behind this event have that same intention. I don't know what their intention is, I don't care. But my opinion is that if you're trying to arm wrestle with spirit right now on this timeline, good luck. So, without further ado, let me jump into the cards. And if you're interested in a reading of your own, you can find that link in the description box. And I have gift cards now. So, if you're interested in one of those, send me an email. Okay, so let's jump into it. I have the Seven of Wands on the bottom of the deck, and the Six of Cups on the split. So the Seven of Wands typically talks about an energy of resistance, but what's interesting about this particular rendering is that it's kind of the opposite of that. It's kind of like a last-ditch effort. It reminds me of, if you ever saw the movie Kill Bill, there's that scene with Uma Thurman where it's her versus 100 samurai, right? And it's like a do or die, point of no return kind of moment. That's the energy that this card has, right? As if there's something now or never about the energy of it, right? That whatever's happening with the circumstances that be in the world or whatever, that it's like now or never. There's something about that, which is interesting, right? Because the whole reason this really even caught my attention was because of the Cliff High prediction, right? So Cliff High had made that prediction apparently back in 2009 that 39 days after Joe Rogan sits down with Donald Trump, we have some sort of UFO melee, and here we are, right? So it's something like that where it's like, because of the circumstances, because of the laws of cause and effect and the butterfly effect and just where the script is sitting right now, that it's like do or die. So something is coming in, and it's coming in with wands energy, right? Which is like a thought form, right? Wands is like projection. If I was trying to like telepathically project an image into your mind, that would qualify as wands, right? So I think that that's very interesting. And it's headed towards this Six of Cups. So the Six of Cups talks to me about like the full circle moment, right? Where it's like something that's been started long ago or planted long ago is finally coming to fruition or coming back together, right? It has an energy of reunion to it. But I'm primarily focused about the energy underground here, right? We see what's above ground, up in the air and the surface. There's this cedar tree, but all of this dynamic energy below ground is really what I'm focused on, right? So one really interesting thing about this card that has to do with the energy of New Jersey, and it's like the one thing that I'm front loaded with that I really want to share before I jump into everything else, is that the hot spot in New Jersey has been a town called Lebanon, New Jersey. And this is a tall cedar of Lebanon tree, or at least that's what it looks like to me. Now, I had posted a video on this channel a couple of months ago where I mentioned that Aleister Crowley, the notorious Aleister Crowley, is buried in Lebanon, New Jersey, underneath a tall cedar of Lebanon tree. And I mentioned that because the epicenter of that anomalous earthquake that we had just before the eclipse in April happened right beneath where his burial place is said to be in Lebanon, New Jersey, right? So that same place where the earthquake was, the same place where he's buried, is the same place where all of this weird UFO, UAP activity is happening, right? Now, I'm not a fan of Aleister Crowley by any means, but there's a part of me that has to assume, considering what we know about the guy, that he must have put a tremendous amount of thought into where he was going to be buried, right? Considering how he lived his life, I'm sure he thought a lot about his death, right? And this area, so right near Lebanon, New Jersey, there's a place called Round Valley Reservoir. And Round Valley Reservoir is called the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey because there are so many anomalous things that happen there. UFOs, missing persons, cryptids, you name it, a lot of crazy stuff happens around that reservoir. And there have been numerous sightings in the last couple of days and weeks of drones or UAPs going into the reservoir, which happens to be right near where Aleister Crowley is buried. And I'm saying all of this to say that I feel like this land might be comparable to, say, Sedona, Arizona, right? How we know that Sedona is like an energy portal or it has very strong energy, whatever it is, right? But it's neutral or it's good. I would argue that, Notre Dame is probably a very similar site in terms of it being some sort of energetic fountainhead or something like that. So I feel like this land is similar, and that's why I would have to imagine that Crowley would have chosen that spot to be buried. Now, another interesting thing about Crowley and that earthquake, it just so happened to coincide with the 120-year anniversary of him channeling what they call the Book of the Law, right? Which was like, the main work that he produced that produced all of that do what thou wilt nonsense and whatever. He claims that he channeled that from an entity named Awas that looks exactly like a gray alien. If you Google that entity, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But what's interesting is that he did not contextualize it as a UFO or a UAP or an alien, but as something spiritual, right? Which goes back to the Immaculate Constellation, Immaculate Conception thing, where it's like there's this fine gray line between spiritual and UAP and all of these other things, right? Another just interesting footnote is that Crowley died and was buried in 1947. 1947 was the same year as the Roswell incident. I can't talk right now. The Roswell incident happened in 1947, the same year that Crowley died and was buried in this location where all of this crazy stuff is happening right now. So I just think that's very significant. The other thing is that this area where all of this is happening, so primarily between the Trump Golf Course and a place called Picatinny Arsenal, all in Morris County, this area is one of the wealthiest places on earth, right? So imagine if this was happening over Beverly Hills. What would your spidey senses be telling you about that, right? And there's something about this place because, again, it's like the burial. It's whatever's underground. Everybody's saying, look up, look up, look up. But I think there's something going on underneath, right? And I'll get into that. So the first card that's on the table is the Fire Ant card. And you can see how it's like this spectacle that's drawing everybody out of the woodwork, right? It's like this crowd is gathering to watch whatever's happening in the center here. And that feels like this event itself, right? It's like the UAPs are somewhat obnoxious, right? It's like they're not trying to conceal themselves if they are UAPs or whatever they may be, but they're bright, they're loud, they're flying low, everybody's seeing them. And then, of course, the media and the government is throwing so much gasoline on this fire by A, acknowledging it, but B, being so ambiguous about it, right? So that's what I'm seeing with this fire ant energy, is that it's like it's drawing the attention, right? And energy flows where attention goes. And like I was saying about Round Hill Reservoir being the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey, this has been happening for a long time. Okay, my family lives in this area, so I've seen some crazy stuff. Anytime that I've slept in that area, I've had the craziest dreams of my life. It's a hot spot, right? So it's nothing new, but people are finally looking and people are finally seeing it and discussing it, which I think is interesting. So again, energy flows where attention goes, and now that it's being discussed, it's visible, right? It's almost like if you're looking for something, but you're looking for something that's blue, but it's actually red. So because you're looking for blue, you can't see the red, right? It's like something like that. Once somebody points it out and shows it to you, you can finally see it. And what's next after the Fire Ant card is the Two of Wands, right? Which is the broadening of perspective. But this card is interesting, right? Because it has something jumping out of the ocean, right? This wands energy, this thought form, whatever's being projected is jumping out of the ocean, and it's expanding the imagination. It's expanding the perspective. And it's interesting because they keep saying that these things are coming from the water, but honestly, I feel like it's coming from the subconscious. I feel like that's the best way to describe it, because I've done some dowsing around the idea of, are they coming from the water? Are they? And it's like, the answer seems to be no. Kind of, sort of, yes, but it's almost as if there's a door that these things are coming through, the door might be somewhere in the ocean or the water or something, but still, it's like, I want to see water as like the subconscious mind right now. That makes the most sense to me, that it's like something is emerging from the collective subconsciousness, right? And the next two cards on the table are the King of Swords and the Starfish. And the King of Swords is like observing this starfish, which talks about things like glamour spells and the looks can be deceiving, or don't judge a book by its cover, but appearances. That's very much so the energy of the Starfish card. And this King of Swords is observing it and giving me the energy of like somebody that's waiting for their cue. I'm almost seeing this King of Swords as I think in Hollywood productions they call them like a script runner, right? Like somebody that'll sit there with the script and make sure that everything is happening according to plan, right? It's something like that. And it makes me think of the idea of disclosure, right? We've always been given these timelines that like, oh, it's going to happen in 2030 or 2025. That doesn't make sense to me, right? The idea of a fixed date for something doesn't make sense. And I feel like this person is not looking for a date, or this energy is not looking for a date. The King of Swords, they're looking for the moment, right? Which is more subjective, but it has to do with like the energetic threshold, right? The idea of like, quote unquote, are people prepared? Are people ready? But primarily it's like, it's almost as if the script runner is watching the phenomena and is primarily focused on what people are saying that they're seeing, right? Because a lot of people are saying that they're seeing these craft, these drones that look man-made-ish, but there's also a lot of stories of orbs. There's a lot of stories of other anomalous type of things, right? And it seems like one thing about the UFO UAP phenomena is that the observer's belief system seems to influence how they perceive the event, right? So people that are deeply religious have that kind of experience. People that are very, I guess, more secular seem to see something that's alien or mechanical, right? And then there's a whole spectrum of things in between, right? When shamanic people have encounters, they seem to have more of a natural view of what's happening, right? That it's like an elemental spirit or something like that. So that's really what I'm seeing here, where it's almost like observing the observers and seeing what they're seeing and gradually kind of turning up the heat, right? Because it does seem like what we're seeing is changing, right? That the crafts are getting stranger and stranger and stranger, which is just an interesting aspect of that. But also, again, it's like gauging the reaction of people, right? As the crowd comes out of the woodwork. One thing to keep in mind about Jersey is that it has the highest population density of any state in the union. And it's not just that it's dense, but it's also diverse, right? So if you were trying to test something and gauge people's responses and reactions, you would want a demographic that has just about everything represented within it, right? So New Jersey is not a monolith. There's other places that have higher population densities, right? You might be able to pick a city in China, but it's going to be a very monolithic type of demographic, right? People are going to perceive things the same way. Jersey, again, not a monolith, lots of different opinions and views and perspectives. And yeah, so I'll leave that there. So the next card that's on the table is the unicorn card. And the unicorn card is like happening beneath this fire ant, right? So I feel like this horn that's penetrating, it almost looks like this unicorn is wearing a space helmet, right? And this little bit of the horn that's penetrating the space helmet is representing to me what we're seeing, right? So just the tip. But everything else is still obscured or hidden beneath the surface, right? So it's like this bit of horn that we're seeing is this light in the center, but there's still so much more going on beneath. And the card that's next to that is the Six of Swords, which this particular Six of Swords emphasizes the idea of birds before land, which implies when you're approaching your manifestation, you start to see almost like warning quakes of the energy. That's not the right way to explain it, but if you're out at sea and you're approaching land, when you see birds, that means that land is near, because birds are always going to hang out close to land, right? So birds before land typically implies if you're trying to manifest something, as your manifestation approaches, you'll probably see things that have the flavor of what it is that you're moving towards, even if they're not exactly the destination, right? So what we're seeing is not the manifestation, it is just the birds before land of whatever this may be, which again goes back to what I was saying about this energy coming out of the collective consciousness or the collective unconsciousness, right? Like something emerging from the deep within us, if that makes sense, because that's the way that I'm seeing this. And but also it's like if you were going to take the most Occam's razor 3D perspective on what could possibly be happening right now, I would say that it's some sort of search, right? If I had to be as 3D as possible, I would say they are searching for something, they're using LiDAR or radar, they're scanning, and again, imagine if this was happening over Beverly Hills, right? But this neighborhood, again, the Lebanon area, the Bedminster area where the Trump golf course is, the wealthiest area on earth. It makes Beverly Hills look poor. Okay, so imagine that, right? That it's like this isn't just happening over the average Joes. This is happening over people who think they are very, very important, right? So there's something about that. And again, it was where this earthquake happened, which was underground, so I have questions. The next energy that's happening after the Six of Swords, right? So the birds before land, as we're approaching this manifestation, we finally have this breakthrough in the threshold of the Knight of Wands at the center of the spread. And this Knight of Wands, I think, is this King of Swords. You can see they're both wearing this suit of armor here. But on this card, on the Knight of Wands, he's taken the helmet off, right? You can finally see his face. And there's this whole motley crew of energy that's coming with him. And it reminds me of that scene, and I think it was one of the Ghostbusters movies, where I guess they had like opened a portal in New York City, and then all of a sudden all these ghosts start flying around, and then the Marshmallow Man comes to life, that kind of stuff. It's like that's what this card reminds me of, right? Like opening the floodgate, whatever it may be. But in the same respect, going back to that Wands energy, it's a projection, it's a thought form, right? And that goes back to like, just because you see something doesn't mean that that's what it is, right? Or don't judge a book by its cover. It's almost like testing the projection or something like that. It has to do, again, like wands are thought forms. It's just ideas. And it seems like when this energy comes in, this Knight of Wands, it's something new. Like imagine if I was trying to visualize a color that I've never seen before, right? It would be an impossible thing to do. But once you see that color, once you have the point of reference for it, then you can visualize it, right? And that's what I'm seeing with this Two of Wands again, that it's like, it's the Two of Wands is the expansion of perspective. It's the expansion of the imagination, right? And it seems like when this wand's energy comes in, it's being it's being directed towards this snake. And the snake card here, this talks to me about the proverbial ice wall, right? And the ice wall to me talks about the boundary of our imagination, right? It's like the wall that we hit when we're trying to imagine something. So again, it's impossible to imagine a color you've never seen, a smell you've never smelled, or something you've never even experienced, right? It's like context is everything. And what I love about this snake card is that the flower of life pattern in the foreground here always talks to me about a map of the timelines or a map of potentialities. Like if you could draw a diagram of what a timeline map would look like, I feel like it would look like this flower of life. And again, this Ouroboros that's surrounding it is basically like the ice wall, right? The limit of the imagination. So this fiery wand's energy, whatever it is that's coming in, that's eventually going to reveal itself, is aiming for this ice wall, right? To basically break down whatever is limiting the imagination. And that's being followed by the tower, right? So the tower is the paradigm shift. It's the breakdown of the old guard, it's the breakdown of the rules and regulations and the way that things work, et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of makes me think of like the concept of disclosure, right? Where we always assume like disclosure would happen through proper channels, right? That it would be the president showing up on TV or something like that. But this tower card, it feels like something different, right? Where it's not going to happen through those proper channels, but I almost wonder if it would be like some kind of direct experience, right? Where it's like cutting out the middleman and whatever this is revealing itself to you directly, right? Like I have to wonder if it's something like that. But whatever this Knight of Wands energy is, it's like it's 0 to 60, right? Knight of Wands is one of the quickest energies in the deck, but it's coming on the heels of the Six of Swords, which is much slower, right? The Six of Swords is where we're at right now, and the Six of Swords is like a very gingerly approach to something. It's almost like when a cat is approaching a mouse or something like that, right? It's very, very slow and steady, and then pew, pounce. It's that kind of energy, right? So we're in the midst of this slow and steady approach. When the pounce happens, the pounce is aimed right for the ice wall, the limit of the imagination. That's followed by the breakdown of the paradigm, the tower energy, the breakdown of the old rules, and it's followed by the beaver and the fish, which talks to me about the beaver being like something that's like a dam, right? That's holding back information, that's holding back water, right? So again, like water talking about the subconscious realm or things that exist beneath the surface, right? And when it's followed by the fish, it's like the fish can finally swim freely, right? And the fish typically talks to me about spiritual, religious, dogmatic kind of energy. But this feels more liberated. And what follows that is the Three of Swords followed by the Four of Wands. And you can see the Three of Swords here, it's literally like red tape, right? In terms of either burying information or hiding information or keeping things classified or being coy or not telling the truth or whatever it may be. It's like all of that red tape seems like it's no match for what it is that it's trying to hold, right? There's these three swords here and this flimsy little rope. I would have to imagine if these swords are sharp enough, all I got to do is pull it and they're going to cut through the thing that's holding them together, right? And on the other side of that is the Four of Wands, which looks like making eye contact, right? But the Four of Wands is when a thought form, something that only exists in the astral, finally becomes 3D tangible reality, right? It goes from being an idea to an actuality. And that's what this reading is ending on, is the Four of Wands. And this Four of Wands reminds me of, if you've seen the movie Interstellar, when Matthew McConaughey, at the end of it, he goes into the black hole and he goes into the Tesseract, and it turns out that all of the anomalies that they'd experienced throughout the film that they thought were either aliens or UFOs or spirit or something like that, it all turned out to be him, right? And he was actually the one that was influencing the past, present, and future, and yada yada from the Tesseract, right? And I feel like there's an element of that here too. And when I say that I wonder if this could be us, I mean literally us, as in not aliens, not something else, not the Anunnaki, not the Greys, not any of this other stuff, but I have to wonder how our own collective consciousness influences events like this. Because people have been doing remote viewing and remote energy work and remote Reiki and remote blasting for decades now. And where does most of that energy or where does most of those things happen? It's like over military bases and things like that. People are always remote viewing. And I have to wonder, as above, so below, anything that happens in the astral typically has to play out in the 3D. So if I'm remote viewing a space, what do people in that space see, right? Does it manifest from their perspective as an orb or as some other type of anomaly, right? When we're remote viewing things, are we seeing things today or are we seeing things in the future? Or are we seeing things in the past, right? Or is it all kind of happening simultaneously, right? In terms of that time distortion. And even going back to the Six of Cups, right? The Six of Cups is all about time, right? Things that were planted in the past that are rooting in the future in this kind of full circle moment, almost like the end of Interstellar. And that's another thing that's been reported, even on the news, the mainstream news, that people have experienced time distortions, that if one of these UAPs flies over their vehicle, that the time in their car will change. And that's really interesting because that seems to be one of the signatures of this phenomena in general around the world, right? So that's everything that I have from all of the cards that are on the table. Let me just read my notes and see if there's anything that I had forgotten that I wanted to mention about this. Well, one thing I will say is that what Cliff High was predicting was a melee, right? That was the exact word that he was using, melee. And to him, that word basically means communication breakdown, right? It's kind of like that final moment of the battle where one side realizes that they've lost, so therefore there's a full communication breakdown and people are either running or abandoning their post or turning on each other, whatever it may be. That's a melee, right? So I would argue that this is a bit of a melee because it is a communication breakdown, right? The governor, local senators, local mayors, local law enforcement have no idea what's going on, right? The government is not communicating with them. If they are, they're not satisfied with the communication. That's kind of a communication breakdown. This does seem to be a bit of a skirmish where nobody knows who's in charge, right? So, a bit of a melee. But it's just interesting to me that, again, this is mainly happening in Lebanon, New Jersey. And simultaneously, there's that horrific melee that's happening in Syria, right? And Syria basically hugs Lebanon, right? It's like it's hard to separate Lebanon from Syria, right? It would almost like it's like if something happened in New York City, it would affect New Jersey and the rest of the tri-state area, right? It's like even though it's separate, it's a different state, it's whatever, they're still so entangled that it's kind of the same energy, right? But I do think that it's interesting that a literal melee is happening right now in tandem with everything that's happening in Lebanon, New Jersey, right? So I think that I will leave it there. I would say definitely explore that rabbit hole of Round Valley Reservoir. That's the name of it. Again, it's called the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey. There's a fantastic resource. It's called Weird New Jersey. It's a magazine I've been reading since I was a kid that made me the way that I am. So thank you, Weird New Jersey. Great reference. What else do I want to say? And and yeah, perception is everything. Again, it's like I have to admit I'm a little nervous about this. I think it might just be because my parents live in the area where this thing is, right? So it's like typically the only thing I'm ever concerned about in situations like this would be my family, right? So for it to be happening right over their house kind of bugs me out. But I think the bigger story here is that this is happening over the houses of some of the most powerful people in the world who own estates that have been there for a long time, Gilded Age mansions that have been there for, at least 100 years. God knows what's underground. I've seen things underground that I'll save for another episode because it's just crazy. but there is a lot that's happening in that area, and it's 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 like if everybody's saying look up, I'm saying look down. There's something down, 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 down. So I think I will leave it there. Thank you, y'all. If you made it this far in the video, I love you, and I will see you soon. Bye.